My mother gave me a choice while my son lay unconscious in a hospital bed. Come home and help throw my sister's birthday party, or lose the money she promised for his college fund. I'm Emily Dawson, 35, single mom, and right now I'm trying not to fall apart beside my 12-year-old son, Alex, whose small hand lies limp in mine under a web of tubes. He's turning 30, my mother said over the phone, voice Chris, and I expect you here tomorrow. If not, I'm done paying into Alex's college fund. That was her exact quote. No concern for whether he'd live or die, just balloons, cake, and financial blackmail. Outside, Portland rain smudged the windows of the ICU. Inside, my world had narrowed to the beeping of machines and the rise and fall of my son's chest. This was the moment everything changed. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't cave, I chose my son. And that choice broke everything and set me free. Before everything fractured, I used to believe that my family, was just complicated, not broken, not cruel, just layered in its own way. I grew up in a pristine colonial-style house just outside of Seattle, white shutters, blue hydrangeas, a mother who made everything look perfect from the outside. Margaret Dawson was the kind of woman who threw themed birthday parties and matching aprons and always had something baking in the oven, whether it was cookies or pressure. I was her firstborn, the responsible one, the helper. By the time my little sister Julia arrived 7 years later, I had already learned how to fold laundry to her standards and how to smile in pictures no matter how exhausted I was. Mom used to say I had an old soul. What she meant was, I didn't push back, I colored within the lines. I practiced the piano, even when it made my fingers ache. And I loved her, I really did, even when she criticized my posture at dinner or rearranged my outfits with a sigh. I clung to every rare moment of praise, like sunlight in a cold room. When Julia came along, everything shifted. She was the golden child, even before she could speak. Mom cooed over her curls, framed her drawings, even the ones that looked like scribbles, and bragged to neighbors about her preschool vocabulary. I didn't mind at first. I liked being the big sister. I helped with bottles, babysat when Mom had showings for her real estate listings, and gave up weekends so Julia could have her ballet recitals. I thought that's what being a family meant, showing up, sacrificing, staying quiet so others could shine. Dad was the soft spot in our house. A mechanical engineer with kind eyes and a quiet sense of humor. He'd leave sticky notes on my mirror that said things like, "You're enough," or "Nice photo, should be in a museum." He never contradicted Mom, but his love felt solid in a way hers didn't. Subtle, but real. By the time I turned 17, photography had become my escape. I borrowed Dad's old Canon and started capturing small, messy moments. A raindrop on the kitchen window, Julia midlife, Mom when she thought no one was looking. I liked the honesty of it. I had a partial scholarship to study visual arts at Portland State, and Dad backed me. Mom, not so much. Photography, she scoffed. That's a hobby, Emily, not a career. But I went anyway. I moved into a cramped apartment near campus and worked evenings at a bookstore to cover what my scholarship didn't. I didn't expect much from Mom, but I kept calling, kept updating her, still craving her approval. Then I met Daniel. He wasn't flashy, no fancy degree, no family fortune, just a steady, good man who volunteered for the Coast Guard and had a knack for making me laugh when I least expected it. We met at a local photography exhibit. He asked me what I saw in a blurry shoreline print, and I told him a story waiting to be remembered. That became our thing, looking for stories. He saw me, not the daughter molded by expectations, not the sister in someone else's shadow, but me, raw, imperfect, hopeful. When I told Mom we were engaged, she was livid. "You're throwing away your future," she hissed, "marrying a glorified lifeguard with no stability?" But we did it anyway, a small ceremony by the coast, barefoot in the sand. Julia came, Dad walked me down the aisle, his eyes damp. Mom wore beige and criticized everything, from my dress to the buffet. Still, I kept hoping she'd come around. A year later, Alex was born. Holding him for the first time cracked something open in me. I finally understood unconditional love. Daniel was deployed often, but when he was home, he was all in. Diaper duty, midnight feedings, weekend hikes. And when he was away, I leaned on my parents. To my surprise, Margaret softened a bit. She adored Alex in her own way, lavished him with toys, corrected my parenting under her breath, but showed up when I needed an hour to nap. I thought maybe we'd turned a corner. Then, 6 years ago, the doorbell rang. 2 officers, one folded flag. Daniel had died during a rescue mission off the Oregon coast. Everything blurred after that. But I had Alex, and I had to survive for him. Moved back to Portland, downsized everything, picked up freelance gigs, and took a full-time admin job at a school. I stretched every dollar, and still, every birthday, every Christmas, Margaret sent bigger, shinier gifts than I could afford. Julia visited once a year, perfect as ever. But I kept the peace for Alex because family, I believed, was still worth holding on to. At first, I told myself I was being sensitive, that Margaret meant well, that maybe it was just her way of showing love. But over the years, the cracks widened. It started small, comments slipped in between compliments. Alex is bright, but maybe he'd be more advanced if you had stricter routines. You work too much, or maybe not enough. It's hard to tell with your photography thing. Every word was wrapped in a silk ribbon of condescension. And Julia, she was always there, laughing lightly, smoothing over the tension like a diplomat. I think Mom's just worried, she'd say. She wants the best for Alex. But Julia never got the same treatment. Her choices were celebrated. Her tech ex-husband, a brilliant man. Her twin boys, gifted beyond their years. Every family dinner became a stage where Julia sparkled under the spotlight, and I stood in the wings, clutching paper plates and pretending it didn't sting. I remember one Christmas vividly. I had saved for months to buy Alex a modest science kit he'd been eyeing. He tore the wrapping paper off with wide eyes and hugged me tight. Then Margaret wheeled in her big surprise, a telescope that cost more than my rent. Alex was thrilled, of course, and I smiled even as my chest tightened. Later that night, I overheard her tell him, if your mom had studied something practical, maybe she could get you gifts like this too. I confronted her, gently, carefully, but she brushed it off. Don't be so dramatic. Children remember generosity, Emily, not budget struggles. That was her way, always polished, always dismissive. Then came the outings. Margaret would pick Alex up for a fun day with Grandma, only to return him late, overfed on sugar and clutching shopping bags. I thought he could use some real clothes, she said once, holding up a designer jacket. His school friends must be wearing this brand. I bit my tongue again. But the worst was how she rewrote narratives in front of Alex. Grandma always takes you on adventures, she'd say sweetly. Remember the aquarium? Mommy was too busy to come, but I made sure you didn't miss out. It wasn't true. I had been working double shifts that weekend to afford Alex's summer camp. But facts didn't matter when the story had already been told. Even Alex started noticing. One day he asked, Mom, are we poor? Grandma says if you married someone rich, we'd have a big house, like Julia. My heart broke. I sat him down and explained what wealth really meant, that we had enough love, enough grit, enough laughter to make any space feel full. He nodded, but I saw the seed of doubt had been planted. Still, I tried to hold the balance. We'd take long walks in Forest Park, talk about constellations, sketch marine creatures from documentaries. I kept building our world with care, even as Margaret kept chipping away at its foundation. She offered to set up a college fund for Alex, and I was grateful at first, but every check came with commentary. You're lucky I can do this, she'd remind me. It's not like you've planned ahead. I wanted to believe it was love underneath, that she was just a product of her own upbringing, practical, proud, unable to express softness. But then she started showing up at Alex's school events, uninvited, correcting his teachers, undermining my decisions. He's too smart for regular math, push him harder. Why is he in photography club? That's not going to help his future. Eventually, even the school counselor pulled me aside. Emily, she said gently, we appreciate your mom's involvement, but it might help if you clarify some boundaries. Boundaries. That word echoed in my mind for days. I had never set them. Not with Margaret, not with Julia. I'd spent my whole life folding myself into a version of me that wouldn't provoke them. But something was shifting. Alex was getting older. He was starting to see the tensions, the sideways glances, the moments when I went quiet after a call from Margaret. I didn't want him growing up believing love had to be earned, that gifts came with strings, that his mother's worth was measured by how much she could provide in dollars. I wanted more for him, and for me, but I didn't know how to reclaim it yet. It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday. Alex had bounced into the kitchen, hair tousled, face lit with excitement. Can I go biking with Jordan at the park? His dad's driving us there. Helmet and phone, I reminded, holding up a slice of toast like a bribe. Already packed, he grinned, swiping breakfast as he dashed out the door. The last thing I saw was his back, disappearing down the steps, waving without looking back. An hour later, everything unraveled. My phone rang. An unknown number I almost didn't pick up. Is this Emily Dawson? The voice was calm. Too calm. Your son Alex has been in an accident. He's on his way to Portland General. You should come immediately. My keys fell from my hand. I don't remember the drive, just the cold of the hospital air and the way my voice cracked when I said his name at the reception desk. They took me to a room where a doctor explained things in clipped clinical tones. Severe head trauma, broken ribs, internal bleeding. He was in surgery. The next 24 hours were critical. I sat there numb, clutching the armrest like it could anchor me in a world that no longer made sense. I called my father. He promised to come right away. I didn't call Margaret. I couldn't. Alex's surgery lasted 6 hours. I didn't move, didn't eat, just waited, whispered prayers to ceilings and machines. When the surgeon finally appeared, his expression was unreadable. We managed to stop the bleeding, he said, but the swelling in his brain is significant. We've put him in a medically induced coma to reduce pressure. The next 48 hours are crucial. Nodded. Robotic. Can I see him? Nothing prepared me for the sight. My son, my brave, curious boy, was unrecognizable. Tubes, bandages, machines doing the work his body couldn't, his face bruised and still. A nurse named Heather placed a hand on my shoulder. Talk to him, she said. He might hear you. So I did. I told him stories about sea turtles, about the aquarium trip we'd planned, about his dad and how proud he'd be. I stayed beside him through the night, wrapped in a scratchy hospital blanket, counting each beep of the monitor like it was a heartbeat. My dad arrived the next morning, pale and shaken. He sat beside me quietly, his presence steadying. Margaret didn't come. She's tied up with Julia's birthday planning, Dad said hesitantly, but she's praying for him. I said nothing. What was there to say? By day 3, I hadn't left the room. My clothes reeked of hospital air. Heather insisted I go shower. I'll stay with him, she promised. I hesitated, then finally nodded, grabbing a change of clothes from the bag Jordan's mom had dropped off. The water was lukewarm, the fluorescent lights in the locker room harsh, but for a moment, I let myself breathe. That's when my phone rang. Mom. I stared at the screen, shocked. She hadn't called once since the accident. Answer, heart quickening. Emily, she said briskly. I need you in Seattle by 2 tomorrow. Asbury blinked. What? For Julia's birthday party. I've been handling everything alone. Mom, I said slowly, Alex is in critical condition. He hasn't woken up. I can't leave him. Her tone sharpened. Doctors are taking care of him. Julia's planned this for months. If you don't show up, I'll stop funding his college account. Silence stretched. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just stood still. You're choosing a party over your grandson's life? I ask, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't flinch. Family duty goes both ways. You've always expected support, now it's your turn. Something inside me snapped. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. For 35 years, I had danced around her moods, begged for her love, tolerated the subtle jabs and glaring favoritism. But this wasn't just cruelty. This was a transaction. Alex's future held hostage for a birthday cake and matching napkins. I'm not coming, I said, voice steady, and you can keep your money. She scoffed. Don't expect anything from me again. I won't, I said, and I meant it. I hung up, deleted her number, walked back to Alex's room. Heather looked up. Everything okay? Not really, I said, but I'm where I need to be. That night, I sat beside my son, holding his hand. The machines beeped steadily. For the first time, I felt something strange amid the fear. The hours after that call were the darkest I'd ever known. I had chosen Alex. There was no doubt in my heart, but the fallout from that choice hit me like a second crash. No more college fund, no more financial buffer, and no mother. And yet, I couldn't cry. I sat by Alex's bed, his tiny chest rising and falling in the rhythm of machines. His face was still bruised, his eyelids unmoving. He looked like he was somewhere far away, and I didn't know if he was trying to come back. Please, I whispered, brushing his hair off his forehead. I can handle anything if you just come back. But the silence stayed. My father came the next morning, a paper bag of pastries in hand, and worry etched into his face. She told me what happened, he said carefully. I didn't answer. She's upset, thinks you overreacted. She blackmailed me, Dad, I said, barely above a whisper. While your grandson's in a coma, he sighed, sitting beside me. She doesn't handle stress well. That's not stress, I said, that's control. We sat in silence. I didn't need his defense of her. I needed space to grieve what I'd lost. Because it wasn't just money. It was the last strand of hope that one day my mother might choose me. Might put me first. Might finally see me not as a failure, but as a daughter, worth loving, on her own terms. Losing that illusion hurt more than I'd imagined, and the fear crept in. What if Alex never woke up? What if my choice, cutting off the only financial help we had, meant I doomed his future even if he lived? I couldn't work, I couldn't sleep. Every twitch of his monitor sent a jolt through me. The nurses, especially Heather, became my lifeline. Go nap, she said one afternoon. Even an hour. Can't. What if he wakes up and I'm not here? He'll need you rested, she said gently. But I didn't listen. I lived on vending machine granola bars and lukewarm coffee. My hair was a mess, my skin pale. I was unraveling. Slowly, but completely. Then came the texts. First, Julia, Mom says you're being selfish. Alex is stable. You could have come for an hour. And cousins. Sad you missed the party. Julia looked gorgeous. Not a single message asking about Alex. Not a single word of concern. And that somehow broke me more than the call. My family, the people who were supposed to lift me, had reduced my son's fight for life to a scheduling inconvenience. I cried that night, quietly, shaking in the stiff hospital chair, gripping Alex's hand. I'm so sorry, baby, I whispered. I don't know if I made the right choice. But then I remembered a moment from years ago. Alex had been 7. He'd come home from a weekend with Margaret and asked, Mom, are we poor? She'd told him we'd have a bigger house if I'd married someone richer. I had looked into his eyes and said, we have everything we need, love, because we have each other. And he'd smiled, believed me. I held on to that now like a lifeline. The money might be gone, the family fractured, but I was still here. I hadn't walked away. And slowly, a different kind of strength settled in. The nurses noticed. "You're steadier today," Heather said. "I'm trying," I answered, for him. Because even in the fog of grief, there was still one thing tethering me to this world. Oh, thin, fragile, flickering, but real. The change began quietly. Wasn't some dramatic moment or swelling music in the background. It was just a flicker, barely noticeable, but it was there. Alex's fingers twitched. I almost missed it. I had been rubbing lotion on his arm, whispering stories about ocean expeditions and jellyfish facts. When I felt it, a slight squeeze, I froze. "Alex?" I leaned in. "Can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered once, twice, and nothing. But it was enough. I called for Heather. She rushed in, checked the monitors, and smiled. That's a good sign. We might be turning a corner. Hope surged through me, tentative and trembling. Later that evening, the neurologist confirmed what I barely dared to believe. The swelling in his brain had gone down, and they were beginning to reduce his sedation. "It's a marathon," she warned, "but we're moving forward." From that moment on, I transformed. I started sleeping at least a few hours at a time. I accepted meals from coworkers, let myself step outside for 5 minutes of air. Jordan's mom dropped off clean clothes. My school friends organized a fundraiser without asking me, quietly covering a month's rent. Alex's recovery was slow but steady. Each day brought tiny victories, a flicker of awareness, a squeeze of the hand, a slurred word. When the ventilator was finally removed and I heard his raspy, "Mom," I broke. Tears streamed down my face as I kissed his forehead again and again. "You came back," I whispered. He was confused, groggy, but his grip on my hand was stronger than ever. From that point on, I knew I couldn't afford to fall apart. I sat down with a notebook and a calculator and mapped out a plan. I would cut unnecessary expenses, apply for grants, increase my freelance photography sessions once Alex was home. I emailed former clients, updated my portfolio, and even scheduled 2 small stoots. Hospital staff had offered to watch Alex for an hour each. I had never felt more tired or more alive. When Alex moved from ICU to the recovery ward, he started physical therapy. The first day, he couldn't even sit up on his own, but he didn't complain. He gritted his teeth and tried. "You're like your dad," I said, tears in my eyes. He smiled faintly. "Strong and stubborn." Exactly. James's parents flew in from California. They stayed in a motel nearby, bringing books and games and home-cooked meals. They didn't ask questions. They didn't offer conditional support. They just showed up. I realized how rare that kind of love was, how unburdened it felt. When Margaret finally appeared, days after Alex had woken up, she didn't ask how he was. She launched into a tirade about the shame I brought to the family by skipping Julia's party. Claire chimed in about the photographer they had to rebook, the seating chart disaster, the ruined. I didn't cry. I simply walked them out into the hallway and said, "You can see Alex for 5 minutes. If, and only if you keep it about him." They were stunned, but they obeyed. That was when I knew the grip they had on me was gone. It didn't matter that they had money or that they'd cut me out of their plans. I had chosen love, unconditional, messy, and perfect love, and it had saved us. After weeks of walking on eggshells and rationing emotions, I found my strength in the most unexpected moment, by staying still. It was a sunny afternoon when Margaret and Julia returned to the hospital. They hadn't visited in days, and honestly, I wasn't expecting them anymore. But there they were. Margaret in her signature pearls, Julia in designer flats, both looking more prepared for a board meeting than a recovery ward. They walked into Alex's room without knocking. He had just finished a light therapy session and was resting with headphones, listening to ocean sounds. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" Margaret snapped, brushing past me. "We've been trying to reach you." I turned it off, I said calmly. We've been busy. Margaret's face tightened. Claire's birthday was ruined because of you. I blinked. Excuse me? You embarrass this family, she continued, her voice low but seething. You could have come for an hour. You chose to make a scene. Julia added, we even rescheduled the family portrait, Emily, because you weren't there. I felt a strange calm settle in, the kind of calm that doesn't come from peace, but from absolute clarity. My son almost died, I said. And you're angry about a photograph? Julia opened her mouth, but I held up my hand. No, I'm going to say something, and I need you to listen. They stood frozen. I've spent most of my life trying not to upset you, Mom, I began. Tried to make things easier, simpler. I folded, I apologized, I allowed myself to be smaller so you'd feel bigger. Margaret's lips parted, but I didn't stop. But this ends now. I am Alex's mother, and from this moment forward, my first, my only responsibility is to his well-being. If you want to be in his life, it will be on our terms. What does that mean? She asked. It means no more unannounced visits, no more gifts with strings, no more undermining me in front of my son. If you come into our world, you come with respect or not at all. Julia looked genuinely shocked. Emily, you're dead serious, I said. You've made it clear that your support is conditional. Well, so is our relationship. The condition is honesty, boundaries, and real love. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. If Alex had died, your last interaction with me would have been a threat. I don't think you've even said his name today. Margaret blinked. Of course No, I interrupted. You came here with shame, not concern, with lectures, not love, and I'm done pretending that's acceptable. I turned toward the door and opened it. You can see him for 5 minutes, separately. You'll smile, you'll be kind, and you'll not say a word about birthdays or parties or me. To my surprise, they didn't argue. Margaret walked in first. I stayed just outside, listening. Hi, darling, she said, her voice suddenly soft. You look, stronger. Alex replied with a small nod. I couldn't hear the rest. After 5 minutes, she stepped out, eyes wet. She didn't look at me. Julia went in next. She stayed longer, maybe 7 minutes, and when she came out, her face was conflicted. You've changed, she said. No, I replied. I just stopped pretending. Over the next weeks, I reinforced those boundaries. Every time Margaret crossed a line, an unsolicited comment, a veiled insult, I shut it down. Eventually, the messages stopped. So did the checks. And I didn't miss them because other things began to grow. I picked up more photography work, small events, family portraits, pet shoots. The school even hired me for their fall fundraiser. I started budgeting better, built a savings plan, and met with a financial advisor who helped me chart out realistic college options for Alex. The best part? Alex was healing, stronger every day. He cracked jokes with the nurses, worked hard in therapy, and even started sketching again. Mostly fish, but also one of me. Holding his hand in the hospital. You made me brave, he said one night. No, I whispered. You reminded me I already was. Margaret followed through on her threat. Within a week, I received an official letter from her attorney. It confirmed what I already sensed. Alex and I were no longer beneficiaries of her estate. No trust, no college fund, no fallback cushion for emergencies. She's made her decision, Dad told me over the phone, voice heavy. She thinks it'll make you reconsider. I didn't. There was no hesitation, no panic, just a strange sense of finality, like I'd closed a door I'd spent years trying to wedge open with hope. Julia didn't say much at first, no dramatic declarations, no calls. But about 2 weeks later, a small package arrived at our apartment, a book on coral reefs addressed to Alex. No card, no message. A few days later, another package came, this time a watercolor set. From Aunt Julia again? Alex asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded. Seems like it. He opened the gifts with mild curiosity but quickly moved on. There was no longing in his eyes, no questions, just quiet detachment. Do we have to see them again? He asked once while arranging his paints. Only if you want to, I replied honestly. He thought for a moment, then shook his head. Not really. And that was that. News from Seattle still trickled in via distant cousins, social media whispers, old family friends who didn't pick sides. Margaret, once the queen bee of her social circle, was now adrift. She's not the same, one aunt murmured at a wedding. She keeps talking about how ungrateful you are, says you abandoned family. But I didn't need to defend myself anymore. People were smart. They saw through the curated Christmas cards and stiff smiles. They remembered who had always shown up and who had always dictated. Margaret began pulling back from charity events, stopped hosting brunches, even skipped Julia's New Year's gala, which was unheard of. She's isolating, Dad told me quietly. Keep saying no one understands loyalty anymore. There was irony in that, because loyalty to her had always meant submission. Meanwhile, I was building something real, small but mine. Our apartment felt warmer, not because of anything material, but because there was space to breathe. Alex smiled more. He laughed again. He invited friends over. He began sketching future projects and talking about high school science fairs. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, Dad called. She asks about him, he said, wants to know if he still draws fish. He does, I replied. He's thriving. There was a long pause. I think she regrets it, he added. Regret doesn't fix things, I said gently. It doesn't make her safe. He didn't argue. Then came Christmas. No gifts, no calls, just a card in our mailbox with a photo of Julia's family standing in front of a ski lodge. On the back, Margaret had scribbled, "Family is about showing up. I hope one day you'll remember that." I stared at the message for a long time, and then I threw it away. Because the truth was, I had shown up over and over again for years, in small ways, big ways, in ways she never saw as valuable, unless they benefited her. And now, for the first time in her life, Margaret was learning what it meant to be alone, not because I'd turned my back on family, but because I'd finally stopped accepting her version of it. A year passed. Alex turned 13 in the spring, and we celebrated in our tiny apartment with homemade cupcakes, his best friend Jordan, and a video call from James's parents. No grand gestures, no matching decor, just laughter, warmth, and the people who truly cared. My coworkers pitched in to help decorate. The school principal lent us foldable chairs. The school janitor, whose wife was a baker, gifted us a strawberry cake with "Welcome to Teenagerhood" in blue frosting. There were no gifts from Margaret, no surprise drop-ins, no guilt-laced voicemails, and for the first time, I didn't feel that hollow ache, just peace. Later that night, as we sat on the balcony wrapped in blankets, Alex looked up at the stars and asked, "Do you think we'll ever be close with Grandma again?" I thought for a moment before answering. Maybe, but it would have to be different. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, saying no, protecting the peace we've worked hard to build. He nodded, wiser than his years. You stayed with me. That's what I'll remember. And in that moment, I knew he understood more than I had hoped. Because this entire journey, this painful, raw, necessary unraveling, had taught me one thing: love is not proven through sacrifice alone. It's proven through presence, through staying when things are hard, through showing up without demanding something in return. I had spent years measuring my worth by how much of myself I could cut away to please others. But choosing Alex and choosing myself had taught me to live fully again. I was no longer the daughter chasing after conditional love. I was a mother who had stood her ground, a woman who had faced down silence, rejection, and fear and kept moving forward. Our life was still simple. I worked 2 jobs, budgeted tightly, and relied on secondhand deals, but it was ours. We had morning routines with mismatched mugs, Saturday hikes, mom-son game nights, and a growing photo wall of small, beautiful moments. Freedom didn't come from money or acceptance or family name. It came from knowing I no longer had to earn a seat at anyone's table. I could build my own. One afternoon, Alex helped me hang a framed photo, one he'd taken on his phone of me laughing beside a tide pool. "It's my favorite," he said, "because you look real happy." I looked at it and smiled, not because I was pretending, but because I finally was. To anyone walking a path like mine who feels torn between loyalty and survival, I'll say this: you are allowed to choose peace over performance, to break patterns, to heal. You are allowed to protect your joy. And sometimes walking away isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of your own.